listening to a podcast made in collaboration with the Copenhagen College Radio.
Welcome to episode 4 of the Social Media and Politics podcast, bringing you expert insights into how social media is changing the political game. I'm your host, Michael Becerra, PhD student at the University of Copenhagen. Thanks for tuning in, and if you like what you hear, tell a friend, tell a colleague, let your networks know we're out there. Today we're going to take a step back outside the realm of social media and talk about something that has a direct, unmediated impact on politics. I'm talking about electronic voting, or e-voting. In particular, we're going to be looking at e-voting in Estonia, the first country to offer e-voting nationally to its citizens. Joining us in just a moment will be Jason Kitcat, who is an official election observer in Estonia's 2013 municipal elections. But first, here's a bit of context for those who might not be so familiar with Estonia and its technological prowess. Estonia is a small Baltic country neighboring Russia with a population of about 1.3 million people. When Estonia regained its independence from Soviet rule in 1991, its tech infrastructure was a shambles, with less than half of its population having access to a telephone line. Today, Estonia is one of the world's leading e-pioneers. It has a high internet penetration rate of 84%, ranks second in the world in internet freedom, and I found this quite surprising. In 2013, nearly 97% of banking transactions were done electronically. The tech savviness exhibited by Estonians is also present on social media. Facebook is by far the most popular social network, with about 2/3 of Estonians using the site. And interestingly, Facebook use in Estonia is more evenly distributed across age groups than in most other European countries. E-government initiatives in Estonia are particularly strong, whose government actively works towards developing what it calls a digital society. Estonia is currently spearheading e-government initiatives such as creating digital visas for non-nationals and syncing citizens' digital signatures directly to SIM cards to make services like healthcare, tax filing, and e-banking easily accessible from a mobile phone. And as I mentioned earlier, Estonia is also the first country in the world to offer e-voting to its citizens nationwide, and today roughly 1/3 of Estonians cast their votes online during binding political elections. In order to get a better insight into exactly how e-voting works in Estonia, let me introduce Jason Kitcat, Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Crunch Accounting and Micro-Business Ambassador at Chorus in the UK. Jason has a long-standing and accomplished background working with issues at the intersection of technology and public policy. An avid digital rights campaigner, Jason has previously held public office as leader of the Brighton City Council, managed the Open Knowledge Foundation, worked as an e-voting coordinator for the Open Rights Group during the 2007 English and Scottish local elections, and more recently, he was part of a research team with the University of Michigan conducting an independent evaluation of e-voting during the 2013 Estonian municipal elections. For the academics listening, the results of that evaluation are published in a peer-review article entitled Security Analysis of the Estonian Internet Voting System. You can find out more about Jason and his work at jasonkitcat.com. That's Kitcat, or follow him on Twitter at Jason Kitcat. Jason's joining us from the UK on Skype. Jason, thanks for taking the time out today, and welcome to the Social Media and Politics podcast.
Thank you very much.
So in the intro to the paper I just mentioned, you write that many Estonians view internet voting as a source of national pride. Can you tell us a little bit about the discourse around e-voting in Estonia? To what extent e-voting is discussed in the public debate, and how do Estonians feel about it on the ground?
It's not really discussed, and that's one of the challenges. When it is discussed, it's more discussed in terms of a success story and about how neighbouring countries may purchase the system to be used there. So, for example, in Lithuania. And that was one of our great challenges, that we were actually trying to open up a discourse when we reported our findings, which didn't exist. So it was taken as quite an offensive thing in many respects to challenge the integrity of the systems there. And that was hard. And also, doubt in the system was perceived as belonging to only one political party who were out of power in the national government. So it was also seen as a party political position for us to question it when, you know, we none of us were Estonians, none of us were coming with any party position. We were all independent experts and scrutineers coming to examine this system out of academic curiosity.
Interesting. So it's something that the government is pushing, but not so well received by the public, or...
No, the public haven't really considered it as an issue. They just think, well, that's fine, with the exception of the Centre Party, who were the party in power in much of local government, but not in power in the national coalition. So most of the mainstream media and commentators did not question the voting system. They just took it as read. It was fine, in the same way that online banking or e-commerce is just fine. So that was just kind of part of the mix for them, that it was something you should do. And so when we came out with findings that were critical of some aspects of that, they took this as a criticism of their national pride, because Estonia is all about digital. They're where Skype was invented. They brand themselves as Estonia for being digital. So essentially, it was seen as an attack on national prestige. And we had the Prime Minister and President attacking us in the media, on Twitter and on Facebook, as being, unworthy and making false accusations.
Interesting. So who exactly is this we? What were you guys doing out there?
So we were, in many senses, a pretty random ragtag bunch of people who have all pursued an interest in electronic and internet voting systems over many years. So there was myself from the Open Rights Group in the UK. I've monitored digital e-counting and e-voting elections in the UK for many years. I wrote the world's first free software of e-voting system back in 1999. So I had that record. There was Harry Hursty, who was involved in the movie Hacking Democracy, who showed that Diebold systems could be hacked in the US, and also was involved in a number of other election tests in Finland and elsewhere. And then there was a team from the University of Michigan, led by Professor Haldam. We were a bunch of people with the technical background and expertise, but we certainly, weren't political actors in the Estonian sense.
Right. And then you identify a number of security concerns in that paper, and we'll get to that in just a second. But first, can you walk us through what's the e-voting procedure like? If we were an Estonian citizen, how would we cast an e-vote?
Sure. So in Estonia, you have an identity card, which is a smart card that has a public key infrastructure built into the chip on the card. So that's the basic identifier you use. And if you're on the electoral register, you can then access a voting app, which is delivered through a special website created for the election. You log into there. You make your voting choices and you authenticate yourself, either using a mobile version of the chip and pin identity card system, or by using a chip and pin reader that you connect to your computer, which you will have anyway because you need it for banking, for signing other legal transactions in Estonia. So it's built on an existing digital infrastructure for identity that is already used really very fantastically across a range of services. The challenge with voting is it's a particularly difficult and unique thing to do. It's a one-off. It happens very rarely, but it's high pressure. It's got to all be done by a certain day. It's got to be secret. It's got to be anonymous, but it's also got to be verifiable. So you cannot have people knowing how you voted. It can put you at risk. But you also somehow need to have confidence that your vote was accurately recorded and stored. And the view of most computer scientists is that this is not a problem currently solvable with the level of technology we have at our hands today.
So it sounds pretty straightforward. The system's well integrated. E-voting seems like just an extension of e-banking and these other things linked to the digital ID. But how do the back-end operations and tech systems work? And sort of what are the security and verification measures that are in place?
So they have a bunch of servers that they purchase especially for each election that are kept in a government data center that we were able to observe. And they'll say, things were specially installed from a clean disk, and so on and so forth. But we found a number of procedural errors and failings in how they did this, which meant that someone could find a way to infect or dirty the system. We also found that we could bypass the security of the ID card systems so that we could secretly vote again for someone once they have left their computer.
So you guys essentially hacked or tried to hack the system and find its weaknesses.
Well, we didn't hack the live system, and that's very important. We observed the live system and the documentation and videos that the Electoral Commission provided, but they also offer the source code for the system or a portion of the source code. And so we were able to take that into the lab at the University of Michigan and take it apart and see some of the failings. So one of the issues with e-voting is that you could, because you can vote anywhere, you could be put under undue influence. So someone could be sitting, by your shoulder at work or at home telling you to vote a certain way. So the protection for that the Estonian system offers is that you can vote as many times as you want, and only the last time you vote counts. Mm-hmm. So you could go, yes, boss, I voted how you told me to. And then go home and vote again the way you really wanted to. But that also means that we were able to infect the system effectively and re-vote without the user's knowledge. So if they hadn't known that vote had been cast, then our vote would be the one that counted. So, the fundamental issue is this is really, really, really hard. This is not to say Estonia are bad or not. They have a really impressive infrastructure. Their ID card system is, world leading. Their digital health and digital tax and all of that are incredible systems. But voting is a peculiarly difficult task because it has to be secret and verifiable, and you need to have confidence that it's completely accurate. It doesn't work like online banking. If you do a shopping transaction online, you can then go and check your bank statement, your credit card statement, and go, well, does that match up? You can't do that with voting, because if you could then the statement would be a proof of how you'd voted, which means you could sell your vote, or someone could abuse you for having voted not the way they wanted you to.
Interesting. And this has implications, obviously, for, as you were saying, if a boss is sort of coercing their employees to vote a certain way, but also looking at Estonia's big next-door neighbor, right, Russia, that might have implications in terms of undermining their democracy.
Absolutely. So I think, what we found was that while certainly at the time of initial construction, there were cutting-edge elements of Estonia's thinking here, 10 plus years later, it wasn't keeping up with the threat model they should be looking at, which is state-level actors like Russia, like China, like the US, trying to infiltrate networks, let alone major criminal elements whose capabilities have advanced significantly. And you have to think that controlling the outcome of election for an EU state member, who's also a member of NATO, that's not an insignificant prize, because whoever is president and prime minister there have vetoes at these major international bodies.
Mm-hmm. And it seems that the voting system in Estonia is very much linked to their digital infrastructure, if you will, with the use of national IDs, et cetera, and as well as the government's push to make it a digital society. So are the problems that you identified in the evaluation specific to the Estonian case, or what are your thoughts on e-voting in general based on your experience?
In my experience, online voting in any way is not possible to be done in a secure manner that complies with international treaty obligations under the current level of technology we have. And most computer scientists around the world would agree with that view. Bruce Schneier, who's regarded as one of the great computer security experts, has said if a secure internet voting system was built, it would be the first secure system in the world ever, because nothing is totally secure. And the problem is that the risks are so great and the prize so significant of influencing a national election. You have to remember that the secret ballot is a really, really fundamental right. It's in the UN Declaration of Human Rights, it's in the EU Bill of Rights. It's really a fundamental part of a modern democracy, because if your vote isn't secret, you're open to abuse, to bribery, all of these things, which we know we don't want in our democracies, and there have been centuries fights to eliminate them from voting systems around the world. So the problems that we saw in Estonia, some of them we have seen in e-voting systems around the world, whether in the US, the UK, Ireland, Netherlands, Belgium, Italy, Norway, everywhere where they've been trialled, these kind of problems emerge, which is just things can and do go wrong, and that getting computer security right is really, really hard.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I think those of us who are younger think, why can't we just vote from our phones? It seems like a natural extension of a sort of technological revolution that we've seen since the new millennium. But since this is a show specifically about social media and politics, which I think kind of goes to this, as you were saying, with the boss coercing his employees, the same could be true of social pressures through Facebook, through Twitter, feeling that you should vote a certain way if you're a certain person. But could you discuss whether the resources and the know-how of a large social media provider like Facebook, could their sort of weight behind making e-voting safe and secure, could it work and sort of make it more generalizable to other national contexts?
Well, I think we need to look at, there have been PhDs done showing that secure verifiable, anonymous online voting is an NP hard problem. It's just not possible within what we know about technology now. And, loads of .coms have started and gone bust trying to solve this problem, thinking, well, this is a huge potential moneymaker. It really isn't that much of a moneymaker, and the risks are just too great. Maybe there'll be some breakthrough in quantum cryptography or something, who knows, that will make it viable, but not under the current limits of what we've got. And what I'd say is, if you look at the costs so far on trials in the UK and pretty much every European country, have gone into the tens, if not hundreds of millions in expense. You can build new hospitals for that. You can do major investment in education systems and other things will have much greater benefit for a society than just making voting slightly easier. So I don't really think in terms of cost benefit and risk benefit analysis it's worth it. And there is an argument to say that making voting a little bit easier isn't really changing the issue at hand. And there is loads of evidence to show that trialing e-voting has not changed participation or engagement very significantly at all. Because the main reasons people choose to vote or not are more about whether they believe that any of the options is different, that the person they like has got a chance of winning, whether the election's close, a sense of civic duty. These are things that make a difference. The voting system, as in whether it's proportional or not, has an impact, but not the actual mechanics of voting, whether it's posting a piece of paper or going to a community centre and voting. That makes a marginal difference. So we really need to step back and go, well, technology is great and exciting, but when computer scientists around the world are saying don't do e-voting, and those are people who make their living from technology, maybe we should focus on some other things.
So there's no shortcut for us out there to cast our vote electronically. Jason, this has been really insightful. Thanks so much for sharing your experience with us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
I've just been talking with Jason Kitcat, Head of Policy and Public Affairs at Crunch Accounting and Microbusiness Ambassador at Chorus. You can read more about Jason on his website, jasonkitcat.com, and follow him on Twitter @JasonKitcat. And that's all the time we have for today. Thanks again for tuning in to the Social Media and Politics Podcast. Big thanks to everyone here at Copenhagen University Radio. Editing by Peter Orbeck. And the funky jams you're listening to are produced by Earfunk out of New Orleans. Signing off from Copenhagen, I'm Michael Becerra. See you next time.